Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's discussion titled Meet Your Life Goals by Starting an SIP. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan. Now, all of us want to save money and invest in options that we deem secure and flexible. But the fact is that most difficult part about saving and investing money is getting started. It is hard for people to determine simple plans to invest money and how to start saving in those plans to meet their financial goals. But help is at hand. For first time investors, SIPs or systematic investment plans and mutual funds are a great medium to begin an investment journey. Why? Well, because an SIP helps you stagger your investments in mutual fund schemes. It is, after all, extremely safe, flexible, and relatively less impacted by market volatility. Now, if you are interested in knowing more, we have with us someone who can help you understand the basics and finer points of investing via SIPs. Our special guest for today's discussion is Aniruddha Chaudhuri. He is the retail sales head at ICICI Prudential AMC Limited, and he will tell us more about this investment vehicle which can help you reach your investment destination. Aniruddha, thank you so much for joining us on this talk. First of all, why is financial planning so important? And what would you consider as the benchmark for a person to be considered financially independent and secure? Let's start with the basics.
Thank you, Gautam. Thank you, all the listeners. I think the latest pandemic has taught us two lessons. One is how important financial security is required and protection. These are the two things which were taught by this recent pandemic. So we all have different passions, maybe a photography, maybe something else. When you are actually working for that particular passion and you are not working for your financial requirement, that's the financial freedom. I think that's the aim, that's the goal for which we all work, for which we should start investing. And it should start with the first step. Can we create an emergency corpus? Again, I will go back to that pandemic. I think it taught us first create an emergency corpus, then start creating something which can secure your financial goal or financial requirement, so that maybe at times you can start getting a cash flow from that particular requirement and you work for your passion and not for money. So that's, in short, the financial freedom or financial security.
Absolutely. And the benchmark, what do you think that should be for a person to consider themselves financially independent? What are some points that you would mention?
So the first thing which I think is important, what is the cash flow requirement an individual is having? Now, whenever a person thinks about the cash flow requirement, my advice will be think about your retirement. Now, again, I think as a country, more than 50% of us doesn't plan for their retirement, and then they start planning it when they're near to that retirement age. Now, if we can start early, if we can think about that cash flow requirement and definitely discounted it with the inflation, because the cash flow requirement today, which I will be having after 15 years, 20 years, definitely with inflation adjusted, the amount will be much, much higher. And then plan accordingly how you can create an investment pattern which can help you to get that cash flow. The moment that is being achieved, then the financial freedom or financial security is almost there for every individual.
Absolutely. As they say, time is money, but you have to give your money more time. So in terms of talking about starting early, Aniruddha, could you highlight some key points one should consider when one is plotting a financial plan for themselves and the family? A lot of the folks who are starting out, what are some key points they should consider?
Correct. In fact, the most important thing which you have already stated is time of that investment is important, not the timing. So I think there are two important rules. The first is invest for a long term, and rule number two is don't forget that for rule number one. I think these are the two things. If anybody can think of, more or less, he will be able to create his own financial security in a much better way. Now, the first step one have to take is set a financial goal. Don't invest only for return. Return is a derivative. But first, one has to create some financial goal. And the goals can be a small term goal, a long term, maybe next year's educational fee, the annual school fee can be a financial goal. The financial goal can be a a child's marriage or child's higher education or a retirement or buying a car or for a holiday. Create those small financial goal. The moment you set the financial goal, the first step is done. Second, I think again you have stated it very clearly that as early as possible. Now, when is the right time to invest? It's yesterday. So actually speaking, there is no right time to invest. The most important thing is how much time you can give for that particular investment. So start early. That's the second rule one has to keep. Now, definitely you have to also keep in mind your cash flow and what amount you can invest. But the moment you think about your cash flow and your expenses, typically what happens, whatever is your income, whatever is your cash flow, you will always see that your expenses or the requirement of funds will be almost similar or more than that. So my advice will be have some forced saving. First, forced invest and save. Then you think about your expenditure. Otherwise, expenditure will be more than always your income, and you will always be taking some amount of credit limit from some amount of your credit cards or whatever way you can. So create that investment pattern and then start investing the right amount in a systematic way for long term. Now, this is the most important thing, long term. The moment you create your financial goal and you create the right amount for that financial goal, stick to that particular goal and invest for long term. That becomes the mantra of creating wealth and creating your financial security. So stay long term, stay invested, and create a systematic way of investing. So a disciplined way of investing will be the key to create a much better financial wealth and security for any investor.
Point taken, Anirudh. Considering investing is not a short road but a long highway. Let's say folks want to drive towards financial growth, but they're wondering which vehicle to take. In that context, tell us more about SIPs. What is an SIP and how does it make for a promising mode of investment? In a way, it's about you're all about mathematics converting to physics, where people achieve their goals. They want to travel abroad. Sure, if you had the discipline and patience to invest, you will have that money ready for you. Just one of the goals. So in that context, as I said, tell us more about SIP and how it makes for a promising mode of investment.
So I think SIP is the most important tool and it's the easiest way of creating a disciplined way of creating wealth. So systematic investment plan may be a very small thing to start with, but very powerful tool. The basic of systematic investment plan is discipline. And the second thing is that how it can create wealth by creating a compounding story. So what Einstein stated that the eighth wonder is compounding, and taking that advantage is actually systematic investment plan. It can be started with a very small amount, but every month if anybody starts investing, there are two things which is happening. One, it's also a force saving. So when I started my systematic investment plan, it was one for a particular financial goal, but the most important thing which I actually thought was is force saving, because two cards which we have, and I state it in a very colloquial manner, two asuras. One is a debit card and one is a credit card. The convenience of, and now UPI and online payment has made it much easier. The convenience of consuming something or or creating or some amount of requirement is very easy at current point of time. And that's why unless and until we do a force saving on every month, it becomes too difficult for us to curb out from our own cash flow some amount after expenditure for an investment. And that's the tool, that's the way systematic investment plan actually works. So every month, every week, every day, one can do a systematic investment plan. Everything is possible. The only thing which is happening is the moment, suppose I do a every month systematic investment plan, one particular day, say first of every month. So what is happening? Every first of month, a particular amount is actually debiting from my bank account and actually invested into the fund which I have selected. Now in a particular first month of that particular day, maybe the market will be 10% up. One particular day market will be 10% down. When the market will be 10% down, I will be getting more units. When the market will be 10% up, I will be getting lesser units. So actually in turn, which is actually a very simple way, we state it as rupee cost averaging, but it's actually a simple thing that what you are doing, you are averaging and you are playing the volatility of the market, and in the long run you are gaining. So that's the way of systematic investment plan. It's more of a forced saving, disciplined saving, creating a disciplined way of financial wealth and financial security. And it takes care of the power of compounding. So, again, as Einstein stated, whoever knows it, they actually take advantage of that. And whoever doesn't know it, they actually pay for it. So, don't pay for it, take advantage of that and create your financial wealth and security. I think SIP is the best tool one can think of creating your financial wealth and security.
Absolutely. It's like exercise. If you do it regularly, you stay in great shape, great health, and same so for your finances. Now, you've emphasized on that point that SIP, it can help one become a disciplined investor as well. Could you expand on that? Let's understand the mechanics of SIP. Is there, say, any minimum amount one should start an SIP with? These are the doubts which anyone watching might have at first when they approach this concept. So, allay some of those concerns for our viewers.
Correct. So, SIP, again, as I have stated, is a very powerful tool, and you can start with as low as, say, 500 rupees as well. My only suggestion or request to each of the viewer is, whenever you are thinking of SIP, think of a financial goal which you want to achieve, and then do some back calculation that what particular amount you require to do an SIP. So a 500 rupees SIP definitely is possible, but whether that 500 rupees SIP will actually create any wealth or any financial goal, that's the answer which you have to give. So every month one can do an SIP. In fact, there are a lot of AMC which provides, including ours, any day SIP. So you can choose any particular day, maybe a day first of every month or 7th of every month or any day in the month where you want to do an SIP. And then every month on that particular day, a particular amount which you have stated will be debited from your bank account and will be invested in the fund which you want to invest. Now, I have given an example of monthly SIP. Now, there are weekly SIPs also. If anybody wants to do an averaging on a weekly basis, every week I want to invest, I can do an every week SIP, which is known as a weekly SIP. There are daily SIPs also. So if I want to do an averaging on a daily basis and every day I want to invest a small amount or an amount which is required for my investment goal, I can do a daily SIP. So every day also an SIP can be done. And whenever you are thinking of an SIP or doing an SIP, think of that end financial goal, not a daily movement of the market. So any day, if the market comes down, be very happy that you are getting more NAV, or you are getting more number of units at the as the net asset value, or the fund units value will be a lower amount. So you get more number of units. If the market goes up, be also happy because your overall investment value goes up. So in both the way, whether the market comes down, whether the market goes up, you become an happier investor. And in the long run, with the compounding, because what happens, you started with a small amount, then that amount becomes much, much bigger with the full investment as well as the return from that particular amount. And then you start getting return from that from the total amount which is being invested in that corpus, and that compounding takes place. With that, the overall experience of an investor in SIP becomes much better than any other way. So that's why I will always prefer an SIP for any investor. And the most important thing which comes is for saving. Frankly speaking, credit card, debit card, and the lure of getting many things, whatever is shown to us in different platform, ensures that whatever you have, you spend and then you go for leveraging. Through SIP, there will be some sort of force saving, whereas you will be under control and there will be amount which will be invested automatically, and you will create some amount of your financial wealth and your financial security. So that's why I think SIP, a small way, but a very powerful tool which can help you when there will be any need, when there will be any requirement.
All right, Anirudh. And say someone watching says, "All right, I'm bought, I'm sold on this idea. So how do I start? Where does it begin? And how does SIP work?" So can you explain the mechanism for the first time investor?
Very good question. In fact, what happens after all those things, the first question which will come to your mind is, okay, that's okay, but now what to do? What amount I should invest? Where to start? Now, as I have stated, it starts from your financial goal. So think about your financial goal. I'm just giving you an example. Suppose I have my kid, and my kid is 3-year old, and I have a dream that I will have my son studied in a particular college or a particular stream where the current cost of the total education is around 10 lakh. Now, when it is required, when he will attain 18 years of age. So now he is at 3 year of age. When he will attain 18 years of age, I require 10 lakh rupees worth amount which is required for that higher education. Now, 10 lakh is today's cost. You have to think after 15 years there is a thing called inflation. Every year the cost is rising. So what is happening? Today's 10 lakh will be some 24 lakhs after 15 years. To be precise, some 23.96. So don't go by the calculation. More or less, around 24 lakhs will be the amount or the corpus which is required after 15 years for my son's higher education. How can I then create that particular corpus so that it can be much smoother? Now the current age is 3 years. I require it after 15 years. Now suppose if I take a more or less expected return of 10%, 12%, something. Again, these are our expected. Now the past return will be much higher. Don't go by that past return. I am taking a more a normal, say 10, 12% return. So for example, I take a 10% return expectation. So with a 10% return expectation, I invest into a pure equity or diversified equity fund as an SIP. Now what amount I require? I want 24 lakhs. I have to get that 24 lakhs after 15 years, and my return expectation is 10%. I calculate it and I see that the amount which is required per month is 5,782. Now I should do an SIP of 5,782. The moment you do the right SIP amount of 5,782, there is every possibility that I will stick to this particular SIP till that financial goal is achieved. So don't do an SIP only for return of, say, somebody have stated that SIP is a very good tool, it gives a very good return, and then do a SIP of 10,000 rupees. Because what will happen the moment you do an SIP of 10,000 rupees and there will be some correction in the market and maybe your corpus is coming down, it will create lot of question mark in your mind. So create that financial goal, think about what is the expected return which you want, and then back calculate and create this corpus or create this SIP amount which you want. Now I have given you one example. Create small financial goal which you require, whether marriage, whether your child's education, whether retirement, whether your emergency corpus, anything, and then break it that how many months or how many years you want to achieve that, and then what is your expected return, and then calculate what's the money, what's the amount which you have to invest on a monthly basis, and then create that SIP amount which you should invest on a monthly basis, weekly basis, daily basis, whatever you want. But the most important thing will be discipline. You have to do it for long term, for that period, in a disciplined way.
Absolutely. It's this flexibility and customizability, which is actually the secret sauce for SIP's success, right? Could you elaborate on how people can use this in the best way possible? This flexibility and customizability, some examples or use cases for anyone watching, because at the end of the day, that's the best way to learn, right? If they see a scenario play out in front of them. So any examples of flexibility and customizability of SIPs that you could share with our viewers?
Very good question. I think another thing which is attached to systematic investment plan is flexibility. Whatever you think of, every flexibility is there with this particular tool. So I am giving you few examples, my own examples, and whatever has happened and whatever I have heard and seen from my fellow colleagues or friends or investors or advisors and distributors. So first, I am thinking about a financial goal which is very important and close to my heart, say retirement planning. The moment you think about your retirement planning, you have to think about your cash flow requirement after inflation, what is the total cash flow which is required, and then maybe some medical corpus, etc., etc. Then, as I have stated, discount it with the inflation. You will see that a big corpus which is required at the time of your retirement, and then see what amount you should invest on a monthly basis. Now, suppose that amount becomes, I'm just giving you an example, say 25,000 rupees. Now, at this point of time, you can't afford to invest 25,000 rupees on a monthly basis. Now, there is a flexibility. You can start with, say, 15,000, and you are expecting that every year there will be some amount of increment or some amount of growth in your pay or in your business, in your cash flow. The moment you can think about that, you can also go for a SIP top up. So what is happening? You are starting an SIP of say 15,000, whereas your SIP requirement was 25,000, and every year you are increasing it, say as low as by 1,000 rupees or by 2,000 rupees. So slowly you are attaining the same financial goal, but instead of investing every year or every month, say 25,000, started with a smaller amount and topping it up with your increment or with your increased value of your cash flow, so that you can attain that financial goal. So that top up facility is there in SIP. During the pandemic, there were a lot of cases where there were financial problem, financial struggle. Maybe there were problem in their work, maybe there were problem in their in investors businesses, and the cash flow was not regular. Now including us, there are a lot of AMCs who are having the facility of SIP pause. You can do an SIP pause. Say I am having a problem of running a particular SIP, I can pause it for 3 months. What will happen? During these 3 months, there will not be any SIP deduction which will be happening from my bank account. But after 3 months, again the SIP starts. Now, what the beauty of this pause is, you are not stopping, you are doing it in a disciplined way, but there was some exigency. Because of that, there was some problem in your cash flow. Only because of that, you have stopped it for an intermittent period and again you start it. And maybe when the heyday comes, you start a top up and you add some more amount in your SIP, and then you get your financial goal in a much faster way. So everything starting from starting a SIP, changing an amount, increasing an amount, having a pause, all the flexibility is there in SIP. The only thing you have to do is start today, start it yesterday, and then run it for a long term for your financial goal. I think that's the only thing which you have to do.
All right, Aniruddha. And is it always necessary to tie the SIPs to a goal? Because when we look at goals, right, you have long-term goals like retirement, you have, say, children's marriage or children's education. Those are the long-term goals. And you also have short-term goals, as you said, right, in the pandemic. And some folks would wonder, oh, what about, really short-term goals? If it's like 6 months or 7 months, do SIPs still work in that context? So tell us more about this goal-based SIP approach, and also allay this doubt on whether it only works for long-term goals and whether it can also work for short-term goals as well.
It works for everything. Only thing is this: a financial goal is important, and according to your financial goal and the tenure, choose your fund. Giving an example, say I am having a financial goal of 1 year, where every March or every December I have to pay my son's school annual school fee. So what I have to do, I have to do a 12 months SIP. Now this particular SIP, I will go for a debt fund, maybe a ultra liquid or a liquid fund or something like that for a very shorter duration, because here I will not take any risk of market volatility. My only reason for doing this particular SIP is having a systematic, disciplined way of saving something, so that on the 12th month I can pay the school fee, or creating an emergency fund. Or for all those things, you can have a 6 months SIP in a debt fund or a ultra liquid fund. Now I am also having a goal of buying a house. Now buying a house, I can definitely go for a EMI, but instead of an EMI, can I also start an SIP? And maybe at the time of buying that particular house, instead of taking a huge loan, I put amount at a time and I get a good amount of discount also from that seller. So for that, I do a SIP for maybe 10 years or 7 years. Now that has to be into a equity fund. It's better to have it in an equity fund, and that also a diversified equity fund. So I will do a SIP for that equity fund. See, it's always better, or it's always important to have a financial goal, whether it is a short term, whether it is a long term. Without a goal, if you are doing an SIP only for a return, so actually what you are doing, you are investing without a goal, and without thinking anything, only for a derivative which at made different point of time cannot be what your expectation is. So I will always suggest, do SIP for a particular goal, stick to that goal, and if for every SIP, if possible, write down your goal, that for what goal you have done it. The moment you write down something, it will be very difficult for you to discontinue it. So you will try your best to continue that particular SIP, and at the end of the day, you will be having a very happy experience of creating financial wealth.
All right, Anirudh. And for investors who have children, the financial security of their child, that's one of their primary goals. So take us through how an SIP can ensure that, can we start an SIP in the name of the child to ensure their financial security in the future?
Again, a very good question. In fact, in a lot of communities, in lot of societies in our country, you will see that there is a namkaran, or there is some ceremony which happens after the birth of that of our child. My dream is when at that particular occasion, if anybody is coming with some gift, that gift will not be any utensils or any other thing. It will be an SIP, or we will be having some day with all these awareness that when any child is born, and if their parent is having any investable surplus to part with for that particular child, instead of doing anything else, they will first start with an SIP whenever that namkaran will happen. Now, for starting a child's SIP, the only thing which is required is that the SIP has to be in a child's name, but the investment will be by the guardian, by the parent, whether it's father, whether it is mother, they will have to start that investment. Uh, there are a lot of AMCs, including us, where an SIP can be started with a child specific fund as well, which we say, suppose a child, a fund which is specifically meant for a child. Now, the advantage with this particular fund is that if that investor, if his parent want, they can also create investment in such a way that the fund will be locked in till the 18 years age of that particular child. Now, the advantage is that within that 18 years of his age or her age, the investment will not be taken out, and the investment will be automatically be there for longer term. And as we have discussed again and again, longer the investment amount is, automatically it's better for the investor, and he gets the best of the best from that particular investment. So whether you do the investment in any of the fund, any of any AMCs or any mutual funds fund, or you do it in a child fund, child specific fund, it's good. Everything is okay. Here you are also getting an advantage. If you want, you can also do a lock-in up to his 18 years of age, so that he can take the benefit of long-term investment, and automatically the wealth he creates on attaining 18 years will be a much better way to start his elder, or to start his journey after 18 years. The only thing one has to do is, the moment he attains 18 years, then from minor to major, that particular change has to be done. So if anybody starts an SIP at a younger age, or you start your SIP for your son or daughter at a younger age, the moment that 18-year happens, please do change it from minor to major. And I can tell you that you, at least your son or daughter, will be much happier, and they will definitely thank you for creating wealth for them.
All right. Now that we have a broad understanding of the value that SIPs bring to the table in the context of our financial goals, I'm going to have a rapid fire round of questions with you before we wrap up the discussion. A lot of the times the doubt is, can I have SIPs and also can I invest in lump sum when markets go down, right? As we have seen recently. How do you address that doubt in the minds of investors?
It's a very pertinent question. And the only problem is when the market is going down, that nobody knows. So today, if there is a correction in the market, whether as an investor, I think it's time to invest, or I will wait for tomorrow. So we don't know when the market is coming down. So again, I will come to that basic thing, that timing is not important. Time for investment, or giving time for your investment, is much important. So lump sum, SIP, both are good, but if you are thinking about a disciplined way of investment without thinking of market volatility, then definitely SIP becomes a better way of investment in the long run.
All right. And continuing this conversation on the finer points of SIPs, how about should we view it as a risk reduction measure or a return enhancement measure?
I think risk is the most important thing than return. So it reduces the risk of volatility, and risk of just waiting sideline of the market and thinking that when the market will come down, I will invest, rather than investing on a disciplined way and let the market takes you and give you a return in the long run.
All right. Any formula for arriving at a, say, SIP amount to invest, a basic for any average investor?
So I think the best thing is calculate your requirement or required cash flow, which is required for your financial goal. Uh, do a basic calculation of inflation, and then discount it with the return which you are expecting from that particular SIP. Uh, if it becomes too difficult for you to calculate, you can use any of the AMC's SIP calculator, or there are SIP calculator across all the platform, or take an help from your advisor. I think that's the easiest way of arriving at an SIP amount. Have the right SIP amount. If it is 5782, invest 5782. The moment you invest 5782, then you will have that remembrance of your financial goal, and definitely you will run it for long term.
All right. And frequency of SIPs for those starting out, you mentioned, right? There's monthly, there's weekly, there's daily. For those who are starting out, what's the best?
A very good question. In fact, you can do it monthly, weekly, daily, as per your requirement. Lot of people think that maybe daily SIP gives a better return. In the long run, daily or weekly or monthly is almost return wise same. If I think about the last 10-15 years SIP in any of the diversified equity fund, so return wise it will not be that much. It will not vary that much. But what happens that how better your cash flow is, and how you can discipline yourself, so that if you are having a cash flow on a regular basis, you want to do it on a daily basis, it's 100% okay. For a salaried person, maybe on a particular day his salary is being created, so a monthly SIP is required. If you want to do a very short term SIP and take advantage of SIP stream to create an emergency fund, or a fund where you require maybe after 6 months, maybe a weekly SIP is also required. So all the opportunities are there, and you can definitely start either daily or weekly or monthly as per your requirement and your cash flow.
All right. Final question to you, Anirudh. The key word risk. How do you determine risk appetite as a new investor? While let's say, I'm agreeable to SIPs as a vehicle of investment, how do I determine what are the risks that I want to take when it comes to investments? Any pointers from you for our viewers?
Again, I think a very interesting point, because what happens now, every investor thinks long term, and then when there is a market correction and he sees his portfolio in red, automatically long term becomes short term. That happens for a lot of investors, and then maybe at the worst point of time he stops his SIP, or takes away with his SIP amount invested, whatever was the corpus. So it's important to understand that what's your risk appetite. uh, just think yourself, instead of going for a complicated questionnaire, think yourself, if you see your investment amount in red, whether you will act on it, whether you will become nervous, or whether you can stay invested for long term without having any worry on the investment. Now if it is 15%, still you can stay. If it is 20%, still you can stay. If you think, and if you actually have observed yourself, that even if it is 15%, 20%, you have not created any panic, and you have went on investing. Because what is happening when there is a 20% correction in the market comes down by 20%, you get, as I have stated, more number of units. So as an investor, I will be very happy if I am doing an SIP for my retirement. Till my retirement year, market tanks, and on that year it gives a superb return. So what will happen, I will get maximum number of units, and I will actually yield whatever return is possible in that last year with a great return. So for me, it is better that market gives a very big volatility in that intermittent years, and maybe at the time of your retirement, it becomes better. The moment you think on that particular way, you will see that your maybe risk appetite is higher, and you may take SIP in a much bigger way, and you can take care of your risk appetite, and you can understand your risk appetite in a much better way. Now, if you think that you are not that particular person, and you will be having a lot of worry whenever there is a 5%, 10% correction, then my advice will be do SIP, but do SIP in a balanced type of fund, where the volatility will be lower, and you will not be having that type of correction. Definitely there will be correction, but it will be lower than a correction into a SIP in a pure equity fund. But your volatility will be much lower. If you don't want to have that type of volatility also, then do an SIP in a debt fund. Now again, I have stated, and what Gautam also stated, it also helps you to have a lower risk, and it's also a forced saving. So think about it as a forced saving. But at the end of the day, I think for any type of investor, whether it is risk averse, whether it is risk taker or whether it is average risk taker person. SIP is required. Which fund, that you can choose about yourself, but do an SIP, start an SIP. If you have not started, please do it today only after this particular event.
Lots of great points shared by you, Aniruddha, from start to smart investor and how SIP acts as a vehicle to help folks get there, reach their financial destinations, and of course, the importance of goal-based SIP that cannot be said anymore. It is important for you to identify, know your goals, and plan your investments accordingly. And the flexibility that SIPs offer you is its secret sauce. A lot of points which serve as a good guidebook for anyone watching is and starting their investment journey. So thank you so much, Aniruddha, for sharing with us your thoughts and insights and giving us some perspectives on SIP investments. And of course, before we sign off, I'd also like to thank ICICI Prudential for partnering with us for today's session. Till next time, this is Gautam Srinivasan signing off.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Aniruddha.